What began as a Dorset Council update about the year-long closure of Dinah's Hollow has quickly turned into a wide-ranging community debate on Dorset Council's Facebook page. But the exchange, that's already generated over 100 responses, has also given some insight into the thought process behind some of the choices the Council's made over the £8 million scheme to prevent the hollow banks from collapsing. It's worth remembering Dorset Council experts identified a safety risk and a risk to life if the banks slipped and engulfed a vehicle passing through, and that's why they said they had to act. Melbury, Abbas and Cann Parish Council initially opposed that stance, but when they hired their own independent expert who came to the same conclusion, they dropped their resistance and backed the Dorset Council project. Some locals argue it'll destroy the aesthetic of the ancient holloway. Dorset Council say trees and foliage will grow back. Others are concerned about wildlife impacts, although there are mitigation measures in place for the work, which have to be signed off by Natural England. In this new post, Dorset Council has urged drivers to follow diversionary signage, saying some motorists are still attempting to pass through the closed section because navigation apps haven't been updated. They say they've asked mapping companies to amend routing, but that still sits outside local authority control. Unusually, the council's asked drivers to switch off their sat-navs when approaching the Dinah's Hollow area, or at least ignore it. They say they're trying to avoid excessive signage because it's clutter. That explanation feeds directly into locals' criticism about the use of signs. Kath Mack says signs returning from Shaftesbury to Blandford are
a bit hopeless.
And she questions how drivers can ignore sat-nav if signage is unclear. But Nick Petter asks why some signs are so tall they obscure visibility and whether their placement creates a danger. Dorset Council has responded to Nick, advising that if signage poses a hazard, it should be reported through their website, so that information can be passed on to the relevant team for investigation. There are staff on the road closure barriers, at least for the rest of this second month of C13 closure. Duncan Manchusa Hill questions why traffic management appears unnecessary at night or weekends, if the road is genuinely closed, he says. The necessity of the works is also challenged. Stephen Hargrave says removing tree roots makes matters worse. Karen Hacker believes planting trees and shrubs would hold the soil back more cheaply. Rosemary Tootill suggests HGV weight and vibration are the probable cause of landslides and that cutting down trees destabilises the earth. Michael Tomlinson suggests leaving it as it is and letting nature restore it rather than allowing heavy lorries to destroy it. In contrast, Alex Jones says while the closure is frustrating, the work will continue whether people complain or not, and suggests drivers allow extra time and avoid stressing about something outside their control. The length of the closure dominates much of the discussion. Darren Garrett calls the 1 year duration
a joke.
Jonathan Cullen suggests it's a year for what looks like 2 weeks' work. Joe Clayton asks whether crews are
only working 5 minutes a day.
Zach Hill questions progress after 2 months, saying it doesn't take a year to underpin 100 metres of embankment. Tony Street is more sarcastic and suggests the council must have run out of roads to dig up in Dorchester. Dan Mitchell is critical and describes the operation as
farcical.
Mark Hooper Brown asks whether this is the most wasteful project Dorset Council has ever done. Abby Humston Lincoln shares a similar stance, adding that locals don't want this and calls it a waste of money, while Duncan Manchusa Hill questions the cost of contractors. Dorset Council has responded to Maltings resident John Hart, who claimed he'd heard the works were already behind schedule, with the authority saying the project isn't delayed and everything's going as planned. Some locals have suggested costly infrastructure works instead. Walter James asks whether it would be easier to build a bypass, a point shared by Jonathan Robson. Nick Jackson proposes filling in the hollow and building a new level road across the top instead. Diversion management, the traffic lights on the A350 and the 20-mile-an-hour limits there in the villages draw strong views. Robert Smith says the 20 zone should go. Claire Inman and Dan Mitchell agree, saying the lower limits are unnecessary. Stephen Victor says it's unrealistic in the modern age, except outside schools. Andrew Roper, though, calls for a 20-mile-an-hour zone at Hillside and Melbury Abbas to slow traffic there before there's a serious accident. Alan Kirkham, who lives locally, agrees and says 20 miles an hour is not unrealistic on narrow lanes, now used as rat runs to avoid Dinah's Hollow. Rebecca Stalker says the diversionary traffic through Cann Common feels like a motorway and suggests policing or speed traps. Stephen Victor says such routes should perhaps be access and private vehicles only. Shaftesbury man Caleb Fulford questioned why temporary lights are needed on the sharp bend on the A350 at Incombe Head near Breezy Ridge, if it's usually safe. Kevin Parsons says he asked the council and was told it was to create an obstacle to slow traffic. John Pearce questions how that helps. Clinton Thrower says redirected HGV traffic past the airfield and across to Ludwell has
absolutely trashed those two roads.
And he says he's already on his second wing mirror because drivers won't slow down at passing places. Nick Merry suggests Dorset working with Wiltshire to prevent HGVs going down Zigzag Hill near Wyn Green. Ellen Bryden asked why alternative roads weren't fixed before this closure, although Alfred had been told that was the plan and there were certainly some roadworks before Christmas. Lisa Rich says pressure on surrounding roads, especially past the Lamatory, is underestimated and the potholes there are now widespread. Arthur Bardo highlights potholes on the higher road between Shaftesbury and Blandford and asks for repairs before the whole road needs replacing. Despite the strong response from the council's post, at the recent Melbury, Abbas and Cann Parish Council meeting, there was some praise for the authority's staff in responding to email inquiries. But as you might have heard from our radio report, concerns remain about drivers using side roads and ignoring those diversionary routes, as you've heard from these Facebook posts. Dorset Councillor for Melbury, Compton, Fontmell and Ashmore, Jane Somper, is holding regular meetings with the Dorset Council Highways team.
Towards the end of the month, because that tends to coincide better with the parish council meetings. So I'll have those meetings and then put a report together on progress. But also those meetings will enable me to discuss areas of concern or incidents that have occurred during that time. So what I've asked and hope will happen is that people will send in any questions or raise any concerns with that dedicated email, and if they're able to copy me in, that's quite helpful because then I can build up a picture if there's a sort of recurring theme of some kind.
That email address is dinahs.hollow@dorsetcouncil.gov.uk, and Jane says she'll come on Alfred each month to bring us updates.